Welcome to another Combat Mission Cold War video. With British Army of the Rhine recently releasing, I wanted to try and get a game in fairly quickly, so today we have a medium-sized meeting engagement. Like us, we'll be playing the Soviets, and while the main focus of the DLC is the British, it also added the Canadians. Since I'm Canadian, I've decided to give them a tryout first. The map is medium-sized with conditions set to random. We ended up with cool, dry conditions, but it's the middle of the night with a light fog, which is limiting visibility to around 180 to 200 meters. The most prominent feature of the map is wide bodies of water spanning almost the entire middle of the map, with 2 land crossings over the water. The first is a smaller causeway which leads to the objective on my side of the map, a small town featuring mostly 1- and 2-story buildings, but with a larger compound in the corner. The second crossing is the main road itself, which ends in the Soviet objective zone. This objective has little in the way of cover aside from a handful of trees. The main road also features a pedestrian overpass, which could be an interesting defensive position, as well as a small hill at the far end so I can't see directly into the Soviet objective. While these are the most obvious crossing points, there are several more that are open to amphibious assaults. Along the shoreline on both sides, there are a series of slopes that lead to and from the ridges. Any vehicles that can traverse the water will be able to do so at these points. My plan for this one is pretty straightforward. I know the Soviets get a lot of amphibious vehicles, so I'm fully expecting Lycus to attempt to cross the water under the cover of the darkness and fog. I've brought a company of dismounted infantry, 4 Lynxes, and 7 Leopard C1s, which is quite an armor-heavy force for what the conditions will likely turn into a fairly short-range battle. Initially, 1 platoon will spread out around the objective zone and right flank. The second platoon will occupy the pedestrian overpass and the trees between the main road and causeway. The third and final platoon will take up the left flank and the other side of the main road. The Leopards will spread out across the ridge overlooking the water as well as guarding the main road. Since the Lynxes are amphibious as well, they will all deploy along the left flank in the hopes that they can make a crossing eventually. I intend to wait for Lycus to make his attempt at crossing, destroy the attempt with the Leopards positioned on the water edge, then push the 2 platoons of infantry along the main road in a counterattack. A simple, uncomplicated plan. What could go wrong? As turn 1 begins, the armored vehicles race off towards the edges of the water. Due to the darkness, I'm not overly concerned with being spotted from across the map, so the vehicles are taking the most direct route. The infantry is almost entirely unmounted except for a couple command vehicles, so it'll be a bit of a jog for them to reach their initial positions. The infantry continues their slow advance towards the main road and the objective zone, while on the left flank the Leopards and Lynxes have made it to the water edge. On the right flank, the Leopards have nearly made it to where they can overlook the water as well. Two Leopards have taken a hull-down position to observe the main road, even though I expect the attack to come across the water. So far, no enemy units have been detected. Most of the infantry has reached the small town, but there is still no sign of the Soviets. Leopards are watching over the water crossings, but even with their night vision equipment, they seem to have a maximum visibility of around 200 meters, which barely reaches the opposite bank. I don't have any intention of launching my own major attack until I have defeated any amphibious plays by Lycus, so there's not much to do except wait at this point. A fire team slowly makes their way up the trees alongside the main road, hoping to get far enough up that they might be able to hear the Soviets coming, even if they can't see them first. With a lack of contacts from the infantry that has made it to the pedestrian overpass, the Leopards on the main road seem clear to advance at least that far, so they begin to head up the road. In the town, infantry has now spread throughout the objective zone to cover the exits off the causeway. A small group is going to head to the edge of the water in the hopes that they can hear the Soviets on the other side. Once the Leopards have made it to the pedestrian overpass, they veer off the road slightly to gain a bit of cover from the embankments. The infantry to the left of the road hasn't heard anything yet, but that isn't the case elsewhere. The infantry on the water's edge have finally heard something. As expected, it sounds like a couple vehicles have slipped into the water on the opposite bank and are heading towards one of the crossing points. An appropriate welcoming party will need to be arranged. Unfortunately, Lycus has arranged a greeting of his own as a grad strike comes in, blanketing my entire half the map in rockets. Much like the grad strike I received in crossing the Brenns, this one lays waste to my infantry. In one strike, any hopes I had of launching an attack are crushed as my infantry force has suffered heavy casualties. Luckily, my vehicles have survived unharmed, but I'll have to shift to defense from this point. Multiple infantry squads have suffered direct hits, almost entirely wiping them out. As the rockets finish raining down, there's a bit of good news. Over on the far right, one of my Leopards is racing towards the landing point that the Soviet vehicles are heading towards. While lightly armored, the Leopards are very quick and it easily makes it there in time to intercept a Soviet BTR as it exits the water. A near point-blank cannon shot destroys the BTR and hopefully the passengers. There should be a second BTR right behind this one, but the Leopard hasn't spotted it yet. I get a bit aggressive and move the Leopard forward down the slope to try and find the second BTR, but that proves to be a mistake. The second BTR has already dismounted its infantry, and they begin to fire at the Leopard with small arms while the tank tries to aim at the BTR. One of the infantry eventually decides to throw an AT grenade into the front of the tank. With the Leopards being so thinly armored, this is enough to knock it out. The crew attempts to bail out and flee, but they are lost. It looks like Lycus is going to attempt to cross on both sides, as my forces clear plenty of Soviet vehicles moving on the opposite bank on the left flank. I had hoped that the Leopards and Lynxes would be able to spot enemy vehicles before or shortly after entering the water, but it seems like the best I will get is some partial contacts. I know roughly where the enemy is and can guess where they're heading, but I can't shoot at them yet. One of the Leopards on the left flank has moved right down to the water's edge in hopes that it can get some shots across the other side. However, it comes under relatively inaccurate fire from a Shilka. Rather frustratingly, it fails to spot the Shilka that is firing at it. The Shilka also fails to damage the Leopard, with no damage done to any of the Leopard subsystems. A BTR makes it across the water and dismounts infantry without my forces getting a solid enough spot to fire on it. Some infantry squads are quickly moving over to try to get into position to stop the Soviet infantry from gaining much ground. After what happened to my Leopard on the right flank, I'm reluctant to push my vehicles too close, so this landing might soon become a problem. While one BTR might have made it across, the ones behind are not going to be as lucky. A Leopard spots a BTR in the water and blasts it with a cannon shot. The BTR that made it to the shore has also now been spotted and comes under small arms fire from nearby infantry, but survives for now. A second cannon shot into the immobile BTR causes it to sink, while a third BTR is rapidly approaching the shoreline. I don't think any of the passengers are going to make it out of that one. The third BTR makes it to the shore and fires a few heavy machine gun rounds at the Leopard, which swiftly destroys it in return. A Lynx gives it a burst of autocannon fire, ensuring it's been destroyed. The Shilka once again opens fire, this time hitting nothing. I believe Lycus has been using target area commands where he thinks my units are without having clear spots. One of the problems with night combat is you tend to find the enemy by stumbling into them, as has happened here. A Soviet team walks into a Canadian team positioned on the side of the road and both sides take a casualty. The Soviet side gets pinned first and stops returning fire, but the Canadians aren't able to finish the Soviets off yet, although grenade toss does come close. Back over on the left, the Canadian infantry has moved into a position on the ridge over where the BTR managed to land and dismount troops. They open fire and manage to kill a couple of the dismounts. On the right flank, another Leopard is attempting to slow the Soviet advance. I know that at least one BTR dismounted safely, and I expect the third BTR in the platoon has as well. I'm wary of the RPGs that they are likely carrying, so it's time for the Leopards to pull back a bit to where they'll be safer. As the tanks pull back, an HQ squad that had dismounted from a command vehicle spots Soviet infantry advancing and opens fire with their SMGs, scoring a kill. The small engagement on the main road continues, with a Canadian soldier tossing a second grenade. This time it lands directly on top of the Soviet soldier. On the left flank, the squad's Carl Gustav gets a clear shot on the landed BTR and destroys it, along with some colorful commentary from the firing soldier. Some of the dismounts from the BTR have tried to move away from the vehicle, but they stray directly into the line of sight of two Lynxes, which makes short work of them with their autocannons. I didn't expect much from the Lynxes, as an M113 isn't the greatest vehicle to use as a base, but so far they've been performing well. The engagement on the main road has come to a close, giving some time to tend to the wounded. The remaining Soviet soldier has surrendered, which brings up an interesting question. Am I against inexperienced conscripts with little desire to fight, or have I destroyed enough of the troops in the attempted crossings that morale is breaking already? Since the main road seems to be relatively clear, infantry is moving onto the pedestrian overpass to set up a stronger defense. Some Soviet troops are spotted in the forest alongside the road, possibly the other half of the squad that was destroyed on the road itself. On the far right flank, I'm using 2 Leopards and whatever infantry I could find to set up a defensive line to try and keep the Soviets boxed in where they landed. A BTR suddenly emerges from the darkness along the main road, prompting machine gun fire from the overpass. The surrendered Soviet soldier is in the way and gets hit. The BTR spots the Canadian troops on the roadside and kills them both before getting hit by an anti-tank weapon and being knocked out. The burning BTR illuminates the area, revealing more Soviet infantry in the forest. The Canadian soldiers on the overpass and across the other side of the road all open fire with small arms and their Carl Gustavs, which quickly break the Soviet force and cause them to begin fleeing. It's not much of a firefight, with the Soviets barely getting any shots in before attempting to run and mostly being destroyed. Having repelled the landing on the left, destroying this advance up the main road, and containing the advance on the right, this is where I was planning to launch my counterattack, had the grad strike not crippled my infantry force. There's still a chance I can gather enough troops for an assault, as by my best guess now, I've wiped out a little over half of a Soviet company. Once again, the darkness allows troops to stumble into each other. This time, a Soviet soldier walks up to a heavy machine gun team. Unfortunately, the machine gun is facing the wrong way, and the soldiers attempt to defend themselves with their pistols, but it doesn't end well for them. I've moved a Lynx over to the main road to help bolster the defense and scout for the Leopards, but it gets spotted by a BTR and is unable to get the autocannon on target fast enough. The thin armor of the Lynx is penetrated by the heavy machine gun on the BTR and kills the crew, but the BTR is knocked out by a Carl Gustav round in return. The Shoko on the left fires again, this time striking a Lynx directly and shredding the vehicle. The HU squad and their SMGs are now the only obstacle to the Soviets along the shoreline, but it seems like they're holding on fine for now. The squad moves up to give the HQ teams much needed backup, but machine gun fire is already coming in on the area from unspotted infantry or vehicles. Both squads quickly get pinned and take some casualties, while the BTR emerges from the darkness, but luckily doesn't seem to notice the Canadian troops. It seems like it'll be a good time to try to get those soldiers out of the area. In another concerning development, the 2 scouts positioned by the causeway have heard vehicles on the opposite side. Is Lycus going to attempt to make a crossing here too? My line is already very thin, and trying to prevent a 4th attack point will be difficult. In an attempt to get the pinned squads on the right flank out, a Leopard fires towards the Soviets to pin any infantry. The BTR's gunner gets shot as he attempts to man the gun, which is a welcome sight. As the Leopard finishes firing a couple shells into the trees, it is revealed its location to nearby Soviet infantry. The Soviets fire an RPG, but it just misses the Leopard. They'll have to back them off to a safer distance again, allowing the Soviets to expand their captured area. While the now gunnerless BTR backs away, Soviet infantry continues to fire, undeterred by the tank rounds. Well, undeterred for a few moments at least. A shell lands directly in the middle of the Soviet squads, causing multiple casualties, and the troops begin to flee. My plan on the right flank is now to slowly fall back and cause as many Soviet casualties as possible between each retreat. It's still the same turn, so I haven't been able to move the Leopards yet, as a second one pulls up. Let's hope that RPG takes a while to reload. The left flank has been quiet aside from the Shoka, so I send a 2-man team down towards the water to check for any survivors. The semi-automatic rifles the Canadians have aren't great in close quarters, and one of the soldiers has to reload after only 2 shots, resulting in both of them being killed. And just what I wanted, more grads start to come down. This time it looks like it's a less intense strike, which means it should last a lot longer. The 2 Leopards on the right flank finally get a chance to fall back while putting several shots into suspected Soviet positions in order to cover their retreat. Hopefully I've guessed the position correctly and managed to eliminate the RPG squad. Having seen much of the Soviet infantry fleeing on the previous turn, it's a good opportunity to try and extract my own infantry. They're still taking fire from farther back, so not all of them are able to unpin, but at least some of them manage to get away. Despite the lower intensity, the grads are no less deadly, with rockets randomly landing near my squads and chipping away at their numbers all across the map. With one of the infantry squads having fallen back on the right a bit, they start to provide cover for the HQ team to also fall back. I should be able to leapfrog the squads back with them taking turns covering each other until they reach a better position. It looks like there's a Shilka on the right side too, or the one from the left has shifted over. It fires a burst into the positions that my squads have fled from along the shore, but the overspray lands on a squad further back, causing a casualty. Morale is getting fragile and the squad abandons their position. The grads continue to cause casualties across the battlefield, with another lucky rocket landing on my infantry alongside the main road. Extensive casualties are sustained. On the right flank, one of the retreating squads was pinned by the nearby Shilka fire and has now been caught by the advancing Soviets, resulting in some close quarters fighting. I've managed to get a 60mm mortar set up where I can lodge some shells into the trees, but due to the low visibility of around 180 to 200 meters, the mortars are going to be difficult to use. My squad gets pinned down, but the advancing Soviets seem to be having trouble seeing the remaining soldiers in the darkness, and instead open fire at squads farther back. At this point, the soldiers on both sides appear to be disoriented and don't realize how close they are to each other. The Soviets continue to advance while a grenade takes out one of the remaining Canadian soldiers. There's one left, and the Soviets manage to run right past him without seeing him. The Soviets were stopping to fire in the direction of the mortar team and another squad nearby when a grad rocket lands on them, causing yet more losses. The Soviets press on with their advance, with mortar fire now coming down in an attempt to block them. The Soviets and Canadians that are nearly on top of each other are in a race to see who recovers from being pinned first, and unfortunately for me, it's the Soviets. More Soviet infantry are advancing behind the lead group, and a fresh BTR is spotted. It fires a quick spray at a Leopard before retreating out of sight, while the Leopard puts fire in the direction of the advancing infantry in order to slow them down. The main road has been quiet for several minutes now, but there's been a persistent partial contact in the woods the whole time. A mortar is ordered to fire on the area. At the same time the shells start landing, an infantry squad spots some Soviets in the general area and opens fire. There's still some survivors of the failed main road attack lurking about to deal with. Since there's been sound contacts on the causeway and the survivors of the main road attack have been identified and are being mortared, I choose to shift some infantry towards the causeway itself. They get spotted almost as soon as they stand up and get blasted by what I think is a tank shell. Another shell hits squads farther back. Over 20 minutes into the battle, and this is the first sign of Soviet heavy armor, so maybe the attack up the main road isn't as defeated as I thought it was. With Soviet infantry pushing up the right flank nearly unopposed now, it's time to take a few risks. One of the Leopards that fell back to avoid the RPGs pushes forward and knocks out a BTR. On the nearby road, a Lynxes also advances forward and spots a second BTR, which it knocks out with its autocannon. It then spots some infantry in the trees and gives them a burst as well. I don't want to risk any RPG-armed infantry hiding out in the trees, so the Lynx and the Leopard continue to fire in the area to ensure that there are no survivors. A bit farther to the left, the Leopards positioned there are also blasting away at suspected Soviet positions to either destroy or pin them. At this point, I have almost no infantry on the right flank, so it's up to the tanks to hold the line. The Soviet infantry continues to push up along the ridge near the water as they are relatively sheltered from the Leopards. The 60mm mortar team has packed up and started to move away, leaving only the HQ squad to slow down the increasing Soviet buildup. It looks like there's around half a platoon of Soviets against 2 men armed with SMGs, which happen to be getting rather low on ammunition. The attack across the left flank has been silent for some time, with whatever survivors are there not attempting to move from the water's edge. I've moved one of the Leopards over to cover the causeway as those sound contacts have been slowly moving closer. It catches sight of a small infantry group trying to cross the bridge and blasts them with its cannon, then finishes off the remainder with its machine guns. Based on the sound contacts, it seems like 3 vehicles, so I'm expecting another Soviet platoon. Aside from the Leopard, there's almost no defenders here, so hopefully it's enough to stem the tide. One of the Shilkas has spotted the Leopard and gets some accurate fire on it. While the Shilka won't penetrate the armor, it has wiped out all of the subsystems except for the main cannon. This Leopard is now immobile and nearly blind, as all of the optics and sensors have been destroyed. I've never had a tank so thoroughly disabled, but still have a functioning main cannon, so it'll be interesting to see if it's able to defend itself at all now. On the right flank, the HQ squad is barely holding on against the Soviet troops. They are desperately low on ammo, but they still have a few grenades left. Undeterred, the Soviet infantry is continuing to move forward. The Soviets have moved into a gap between the trees, which allows a Leopard to spot them and take down the couple soldiers that have moved farther ahead than the rest. Moments later, a Lynx from the left flank has arrived. The HQ squad may be saved. The Lynx quickly opens fire on the Soviet infantry with its autocannon, scoring multiple kills. Meanwhile, the Leopard has also spotted more infantry and fires shells into the Soviet positions. It appears the attack on the right flank has been crushed. Lycus decides to test the abilities of the crippled Leopard by advancing up the causeway. While the Leopard does not see their approach, as it turns out it can see out to about 30 meters. The BTRs try to make a rush across the end of the causeway, but as soon as they hit the 30-meter mark, the Leopard opens fire. The lead BTR is knocked out, which causes the BTR behind it to slow down in order to go around the wreck. As it does so, the Leopard hits it as well. There should be one more BTR, but the end of the causeway is now rather blocked and it will have difficulty advancing farther. The final BTR gets spotted, but this time the Leopard misses. The infantry in the BTR quickly dismount before the BTR itself starts to reverse away. There's still a chance the dismounts can make it to the edge of the objective and contest it. A second Leopard has raced over to help shore up the defenses and prevent the Soviets from reaching the objective, which they are mere meters away from. A couple Soviet infantry try to make the dash onto the objective's corner, but they get spotted by the last remnants of my central infantry and the second Leopard. As the Soviet infantry begin to flee, the BTR comes into sight again and takes a hit from the Leopard. That's another Soviet attack successfully stopped. On the far right, with the forest seemingly cleared of infantry, the Leopard takes a chance and moves up again. It knocks out a BTR before coming under fire from machine guns. It takes a moment, but then spots the second BTR and knocks it out as well. A third BTR gets briefly spotted, but wisely retreats while the Leopard is reloading. With 4 attempted crossings defeated, Lycus has run out of forces to attack with. I don't have enough infantry of my own to launch my counterattack, so we settle for a ceasefire. I've lost a combined total of 62 men, 1 Leopard and 2 Lynxes, while Lycus has lost a staggering 124 men and 14 vehicles. Several of my Leopards ended up with 20 plus kills, likely from hitting full BTRs before they could unload. Looking at the final positions at first, it appears there's lots of units left, but taking a closer look, most of them are down to only a couple of soldiers each. Overall, a fun game with some interesting complications from the darkness and fog. After being crippled by yet another grad strike, I spent a lot of time on the defensive, struggling to not be overrun. While the Canadians lack infantry small arms firepower due to their semi-automatic rifles, the Carl Gustavs, Leopards, and Lynxes did a solid job making up for it. Thanks for watching, everyone.